this video is probably going to be long, so feel free to skip along if you want, skip through it. I know most of you do that anyways, so... so I guess my obsession with the M1 started when I was 10. Back in 2002, when the game Medal of Honor Allied Assault came out. And probably about then is when I saw Band of Brothers. And then, through the years, of course, more World War II games came out. The other one that I liked a lot was Medal of Honor Rising Sun. And then probably the best World War II game, I think the height of World War II games was Call of Duty World at War. And then after that, they just became crap. But anyways, I can remember going to my first gun show. Probably wasn't until I was 15 or so, and they had a stack of Garands at the gun show, and I got to actually pick one up. I still remember that. The guy had a clip of rounds, didn't let me load in, but they were like the realistic ones. They looked just like this, but he had the tops painted white, so I guess he knew they were duds. But these here are the duds I use. Got these on eBay. But I just remember that, and it was such a big moment in my life to actually get to hold one of these, and now I have a collection of them. And this isn't all of them. It's just the ones that I want to put on camera and can put on camera. As you can see, everything's pretty much full. Yeah, so I remember back around that same time frame, 2008, 2006, I guess, Springfield Armory Inc. was still making these, because I had went online to see if they were still making Garands, if anybody was making Garands at the time, and lo and behold, that's when I found out about the CMP. And that's whenever I saw that Springfield Armory Inc. I didn't know at the time there was a difference. At the time, I thought it was still Springfield Armory. And that's when I found out that they were still making Garands. But, later in life, I'd realized that, they were using cast receivers. And obviously, Springfield Armory Inc. isn't Springfield Armory that made these in World War II and after World War II. So... yeah, I've been, my obsession with the M1 goes back quite a ways. Basically my whole life. And I didn't get to shoot one of these until I was an adult, for sure. No one I knew, no one in my family was into guns, let alone old World War II guns. I mean, my dad had a hunting rifle and a pistol, and that was about it. So, I bought my first one like 8 years ago. And that was before the CMP, and I think I paid like $1,000 for that. And over the years I bought some from the CMP eventually, and then I've paid up and down prices, But anyways, I just wanted to say that the gun means a lot to me, and it basically started my firearms addiction. It was this gun here. In fact, when I was in 2010, 2011, when I graduated high school, 2010, obviously, when you're just out of high school, you can't afford guns like this, and I didn't think about joining the CMP or anything. I remember going to gun shows and only being able to afford Mosin and Gants. Back then, they were, $89 out the door, and that's how I got into, the com block stuff, the AKs and stuff, because back then, everything was so much cheaper. And I've always been into the military as well. I've always wanted to join the military. I always wanted to go in the Marine Corps. Unfortunately, I have a bad heart, so they wouldn't let me join. And that's how I got into the ARs and stuff too. And all my ARs, most of them you'll see, if I show them on video, they're always usually clones. Every now and then I'll put a video up of a gun that's not a clone of a military, M16 or M4, but I mainly like the military stuff, and that goes with all the guns that I have. If it's not military, I typically don't like it or use it or buy it. But that's just me. It doesn't mean that military guns are any better than any other guns. Obviously, we all know that's not the case. But I'm actually going to start redirecting my collection here, and I'm going to start focusing on USGI stuff. And so anyways, so let's talk about these books here real quick. So this book here was my first book, this M1 Garand, and if you're starting out on the M1, this is the book I recommend, because this book has a ton of, it can tell you if its parts correct, how to make it parts correct, what's parts correct. It tells you everything for the correct serial numbers. I mean, everything you want to know is pretty much in this book. Talks about the star cartouches. Where I just saw that at? Yeah, right there. There. And then talks about the P. I mean, it talks about everything. I mean, that shows you all the serial number ranges for what should be on the stock cartouche there. And the dates. This is definitely the first book I would get, and I don't think it's that expensive. It's 25 bucks. As you can see, this book has hard use. I've taken a lot of Garands down and had this book in my hand at the same time. You can see it's kind of black there. So this is definitely one of the first books I suggest you start with. My next book was this one here, The Rifle. This is a book I highly recommend everybody gets. This isn't specifically about the M1. It is and it's not. It's what you see right there. I have a video on this book specifically, but it's about combat stories from America's last World War II veterans. Basically, everybody in this book used an M1 Garand in World War II. Almost. There's like 3 stories, I think, that don't. And while we're here, I'll just talk about, in this book, you don't hear anybody bitching about M1 thumb. You don't hear anybody bitching about the ping, because those things didn't exist. The ping didn't matter. And you don't get M1 thumb by loading rifles anyways. You get them by being stupid. I'm sorry, you get it by being stupid. So this was my next book here. This book is, holy heck, I really recommend this book. I mean, wow. I mean, you see I highlighted some stuff. This book is just amazing. It really is. I mean, I learned so much in this book. If you're into military history or anything, any history, and you don't read books, you're wrong. For a long time, I didn't read books. And I regret that, because I learned so much. And today's video is basically going to be information from this book. So I got this book because I wanted to do a video on commercial ammo in the M1. And I wanted to see what the gun was actually manufactured for. Or, I'm sorry, what the gun was built around. What ammunition. Was it 1906 ball? Was it M1 ball? Was it M2 ball? And what the soldiers used in World War II. Well, this book really didn't talk about it much. But still a great book. I love this book. Pick this book up. I think this book was like 50 bucks. This was, I think, the most expensive out of all the books I have. And then this book here, if you want, you can pick up too. It's the Book of the Garand by Julian S. Hatcher. This is a great book as well. This book was a wealth of knowledge for talking about commercial ammo and what the gun was designed to shoot, how the gun performed. This book, if you want to know what the gun was actually designed for, I'll just tell you, it was designed for M1 ball, not M2. Pick up this one. And like I said, I picked this book up on Amazon. I think it was like 10 bucks or something. It's okay. It's not bad. It just has some, like this talks about the ping and how soldiers used to throw their clips on the ground, blah, blah, blah. Just a bunch of stupid crap. But, I mean, it's got some cool illustrations. That's probably the best thing about the book is the illustrations. So, anyways, you can pick this book up. The ammunition I have over here is all this stuff here. This is all World War II dated. I think one clip's 45, 2 clips are Winchester 43 dated, and I actually have 1 clip of 42 dated as well. And then these are actual World War II end blocks as well. So I got this bayonet. I've always wanted a Garand bayonet, but I wanted a World War II one. I just picked this up, a couple months ago. These things are kind of expensive for an original in good condition. This is AFH made bayonet. It's a World War II bayonet. I'm super glad I got it. It came with a reproduction scabbard, but that's okay. I don't think I'll bother picking up an original scabbard. Like I said, these things are expensive. So, and then the other 2 Garands, the top one's a Winchester, but the middle one's a Springfield. These are both Springfield armories. And then up top there, you'll see a case that I usually put them in a case mainly because I keep the slings tight like that, so that way they don't get away in the safe, and then I'll put them in the case, and then that'll have a sling on it, so that way I can carry it easier. So, alright, enough about what I have here. Well, it's 16 minutes already, I didn't even start talking about the good stuff yet. So basically, I didn't know this, back in September 20th, 1900, is when they actually started looking for a semi-automatic rifle. I guess started talking about it and stuff, which is, I mean, crazy. Think about it. So 36 years it took to get one adopted. I think it really started taking off November 4th, 1919, and that's when John Garand was appointed to Springfield Armory as a general ordnance designer. And as you can see, I'm actually reading off my tablet. I actually have a ton of notes here. So, so John Garand was, I think everyone knows, Canadian, and the way you pronounce it is Garand, not Garand. And he was very adamant about that. It's Garand. So, obviously, if you want to call the rifle Garand, you can do whatever you want, but to be technical and to be correct, it's Garand. So, also, I think everyone knows this too, but there's a little part of this that I didn't know. So it says from the beginning, the order was that the rifles should be near to 30 caliber as possible, but no less than 276. So I think a lot of people, myself included, thought that the rifles were designed, and like I said, there was a couple different. There was 2 main, the Pedersen rifle and the M1 Garand, and there was a couple other. I think a lot of people thought that the Garand the original was designed in 276, and it wasn't till, who was it, John MacArthur, I think? One of them came down and said, I think it was John MacArthur, came down and said, you know, we're not doing 276 anymore, we're doing 30, and then Garand went back and designed a 30 caliber from scratch, but that wasn't the case. He was actually designing the 30 caliber and the 276 at the same time, which Pedersen did not do that. He just designed one in 276, which has a lot to do with why the Garand was adopted. It's not the only reason, but it has a lot to do with it. The 276 Garand was 10 rounds. I think a lot of people know that, and the 30 caliber was 8. One thing I didn't know, which I guess makes sense, but both of the rifles, the 276 and the 30 caliber, in both rifles, the clips ejected out the top, just like in the Garand we have now. So, one other thing I thought was pretty cool, let's see here once. Alright, so the holes in the buttstock for the cleaning kits, I figured they were designed with the gun, because I'm pretty sure the 1903 has the cleaning kit holes in them. But it says, in the book it said the hole in the buttstock for the cleaning kit wasn't added to October 1939. So that's pretty interesting. You figure the Garand was adopted in 36. I don't know exactly when it started seeing field use. I didn't look. It probably said in the book, I just didn't catch it. But I mean, that's a couple years until they decided to put a cleaning kit in there. And one more thing I didn't know all this whole list, but a couple of things that I didn't know. So a lot of people think that because the Marine Corps used the 1903 on Guadalcanal, they think that we didn't have M1s right away, and that's not the case. I think the Army and the Navy, or at least the Army, was fully equipped with M1 rifles by 1941. The Marine Corps did not want the M1 Garand, but they tested the Garand in 1940. I didn't know that. So it says here the Marines actually tested the M1 and the Johnson rifle and the Winchester short stroke rifle in 1940, concluding, quote, "At present time, however, the Marine Corps feels that its tests conclusively proved the M1 rifle is the most satisfactory semi-automatic rifle available." Now, what was going on in 1940 was there was a lot of people, they were poo-pooing the M1, saying it wasn't the right rifle, and all this other crap. Well, when the Marine Corps tested the rifles, it basically shut everyone up. In 1941, the stocks were plastic stocks were tested. 2 commercial manufacturers were contracted to develop M1 stocks out of synthetic resin. One of the manufacturers was Standard Products, which I'm sure many of you know. Later, they made M1 carbines. The other company was Norris Plastic Company. Upon completion, both stock designs were rejected. And I guess they stopped after those 2 designs. But I think, well, I'll get to that at the end. So, a lot of people also, I always heard a lot of times, people say, oh, you use raw linseed oil, or, boil linseed oil, which I think most people say the correct thing to use is raw linseed oil on the stock finishes. If you're going to be finished a stock or whatever, that's actually not true. So, it was true in the beginning, but in 1941, they went from linseed oil to tung oil because linseed oil smoked and sweated during prolonged periods of fire. So, I see a lot of guys, they'll say, you put a coat a day for 20 years. I mean, whatever. You do you. If that's what you like, you do you. So, one more thing. Well, a lot of things. So something else I found very interesting was a total of 3,800 gauges were used in the manufacture of the M1. That's a lot. I mean, I have a bore gauge. That's one of 3,800. That's crazy. A lot of people talk about General Patton's quote, and they say that it's actually one of the most misquoted quotes I've seen. Like, literally, that's a legit quote. I mean, people get that wrong all the time, and they just come out and spout it. I'm going to put a picture in of the whole letter so you can see what the whole letter was. But I can't stand when people quote that and then they say it wrong. But the reason I brought that up was I'm going to read you a quote from General MacArthur that I never hear. And I think this one's better. So, this is General MacArthur reporting to the Ordnance Department. So, during a heavy firefight on the Bataan. So, this is quote here now. This is, under combat conditions, it operated with no mechanical defects, and when used in foxholes, did not develop stoppages from dust and dirt. It has been in most consistent action for as much as a week without cleaning or lubrication, which is another thing. And obviously this is a point of contention on the rifle. Let me pull this up here once. So a lot of people, and even today, will complain about this big hole back here. Even when the bolt's in there, there's still a huge hole there. But the GIs, they didn't seem to care. I never heard that the rifles were jammed up because of dirt. Now, obviously, if you're like in range or other people and you shove a pile of mud in there, it's not going to work. But, I mean, I digress. Obviously, these aren't my go-to rifles if, I ever needed one, but they could be, and I just think that's kind of necessarily unfair. Should there be a big hole back there? No, but I have yet to hear really of anyone bitching about it. Like I said, that book there is a whole mess of survivors that use the Garand. They never said anything. General MacArthur doesn't seem to mind the hole back there. Anyways, so this is another very, very interesting thing, and actually I wanted to put my tub of grease out here and I forgot. So use of the M1 during fighting in the tropics revealed a tendency for the rifle breech mechanism to freeze under heavy rainfall conditions. The adopted fix was to issue small plastic containers filled with water-repellent commercial lubricant named Lubriplate 130A, and that was adopted in the summer of 1943. So, did they not use grease before 1943? The book didn't say that. I'm not sure if they just didn't grease them, they just oiled them before 1943, and then started oiling them or greasing them after 1943. Either way, that's the grease I use on my M1. I use Lubriplate 130A. That's really the best grease. I used to use Walmart grease, like Mobile One synthetic wheel bearing grease. But the Lubriplate 130A, which you can get on Amazon or wherever, that's much better. I think it like melts when it warms up. It's really good. I just like it a lot. I like it a lot. So the summer of '44, a project began to develop folding stocks and shortened barreled versions of the M1 to adapt it to paratroop service. We're going to get a little more into the shortened barrels in a bit, but I didn't know that either, and I'll put pictures of the folding stocks in, and obviously you guys know what a shortened barrel, I mean, the tanker Garands, but I'll get into that in a minute here. So, another important project to carry out was the development of a new bolt and op rod in the M1 schematic called for the incorporation of a roller on the right lug of the bolt. It seemed that was the best way to correct the freezing in heavy rain, but the roller would not be adopted till 1957 in the M14. So what I found very interesting is they have the whole recipe for the M14, all of it, the plastic stocks, the roller on the bolt. I'm going to talk about magazines here in a little bit. And, the only difference, now is the shortened gas system. It's kind of like, why did they wait till 1957 to adopt the M14? It seems to me the M14 should have been adopted in 44 or 45, and then the M16 should have been adopted in the 60s with no problem. Anyways, but you'll see that it is quite interesting. In 1944, they pretty much had all the fixings for the M14, but it took, over 10 years to actually adopt the M14, which is, I think, interesting. Didn't know that. So, the summer of 1944, they developed a T20, which was either fully or semi-automatic, and had a 20-round BAR magazine. And they also had the fully automatic, too, which is interesting. And that was the summer of '44. So the first trial was sent to Aberdeen in November '44, and there were several issues with the BAR magazine. Changes were recommended in January. The T20E1 was sent to Aberdeen for testing. Additional testing led to the T20E2, and in May 1945, listen to this, this is good. In May 1945, Springfield was ordered to produce 100,000 for the invasion of Japan that was scheduled for November 1945. Japan's surrender led to the cancellation of the T20E2. So they were going to put this into effect. They were going to put a fully automatic 20-round box-fed M1 Garand with the... I don't think they were going to put the roller. They may have put the roller on the board. I don't know. But either way, they were basically going to field the M14 in 1945. What the hell? So, that just kind of explains to you, or shows you, that the M14 was actually severely out of date in the 12, 13 years it took them to actually adopt the thing. Now, I love the M14. I do. It's just crazy, It's nuts. Another interesting, and so I guess we're going to go back to the tanker version now of the M1 Garand. So another interesting project was undertaken during this period, so 44, 45, was the development of a modified M1 designed as the T-26. Most notable change of this gun, M1, was an 18-inch barrel, also known in the commercial market as the tanker Garand. The Ordnance Department manufactured 15,000 shortened rifles for the airborne. Some were actually used on the famous airborne assault on the Corregidor in 1945. They found that there was way too much blast to recoil, and that's pretty much why it didn't ever go anywhere. Which is very interesting to me, because I always thought that the tanker Garand was just a commercial thing, but no, it was an actual thing that they tested and actually put into field use. 15,000, and I believe the book said that they have no idea where those guns went. So if you have a tanker Garand and you were told it was World War II, I think the book also says that there's absolutely no way to substantiate. They don't have any records. I mean, they have records, but they don't have anything to substantiate any of the Garands. They have no idea what happened to them, the tankers, anyways. So they were probably all taken down and converted back into regular M1s. So if you are told that you want a tanker Garand and someone comes up to you and says this one was used in World War II, I would say they're full of shit. But anyways, I really hope you learned something. If you like the M1 and you have an interesting story about how you got into the M1 or guns in general, you can leave them in the comments. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I'm by no means an expert. It's just I do have an obsession with this gun. I don't know why. Thanks for watching, and hope you learned something. Have a good day.